For Honor is not what it looks like on the surface. To call it a nerdy dream of Vikings, knights, and samurai cutting each other's heads off is only describing the tip of the iceberg. What's underneath is a surprisingly original remodeling of the fighting game genre. The classic rock-paper-scissors oriented combat is still there, but this time attacking and defending is more realistic and visceral than simply pressing the attack button or holding back to block. Instead, you're pressing one button that controls whether you want to attack from the left, the right, or above. This applies to defending as well. For Honor's equivalent of a throw has been replaced by guard breaking, which, if successful, frees up a short window of time to put some guaranteed hurt on your enemy without any interruptions. These are just the basics though. Depending on the class you choose to play, your moveset and playstyle can vary dramatically. If you've already gathered, the game's classes are split amongst 3 factions: the Vikings, the Knights, and the Samurai. Each faction has 4 classes. There are Vanguards, designed to be adaptable to the battlefield. Assassins, best known for their speed and mobility. Heavies, the slower, harder-hitting archetype. And Hybrids, combining a little bit of each class into one hero. It's important to mention that each hero plays entirely different than the other. Some have endless chain combos. Some have ways to close the gap between you and your opponent. And some even have ways of shoving enemies off a cliff. Playing a certain hero requires you do your research, learn that character's strengths, and play to those strengths. Each one ends up feeling like a whole different game. I had limited time during open beta, but decided to get familiar with the Viking Assassin class, aptly named the Berserker. I rarely had to defend against attacks, as dodging was my primary method of avoiding damage. Luckily, the Berserker has a unique move that allows me to dodge and attack at the same time, setting my opponent up for a subsequent series of chain attacks and punishing them for missing me the first time. Each class also has unique execution animations, providing you depleted your opponent's health with a heavy attack. They're extremely satisfying to pull off, but their inclusion in the game isn't just a aesthetic. In multiplayer, executing your opponent ensures that the enemy team won't be able to revive them. Speaking of multiplayer, the game features a cross-platform mode called Faction Wars. Prior to starting the game, you're prompted to choose which faction you pledge allegiance to. From the main menu, you're presented with a map with different factions fighting over different territories. After every match you complete, you're given war assets that you can manually deploy to specific territories, or just let the game automatically distribute your war assets for you. This map is updated every season, or 2 weeks, to account for which faction holds the most territories. Whichever faction wins the most territories gets bonus gear. Ubisoft claims this game will forever take into account past faction wars to make permanent changes to the world map. How this comes into play exactly is up in the air, but this is far from the only multiplayer mode in the game. Duels are a great way to learn a character you just started, pitting them up against different matchups. Brawls allow you to duke it out in teams of 2. Elimination places 2 teams of 4 on the map. And Dominion is also 4 vs 4, but features zone control, where both teams are racing to get 1,000 points first to trigger sudden death for the other team. But as it was in beta mode, this experience was limited. The full game will feature a single-player mode, and will get access to all 12 heroes instead of just 9. For the most part, particularly in Brawl, and occasionally in Elimination, it's customary to respect one-on-one combat and refrain from jumping in to help your teammate take down an isolated enemy. I imagine this custom will continue until most of the player base gets a better handle on fighting 2 enemies at once, but I've noticed most of the player base seems to be respectable and honorable. The game is called For Honor after all, but don't be surprised if you end up being ganked by the entire enemy team. I've always been a fan of fighting games, but since I was just a tiny boy gamer, I always dreamed of a fighting game that took into account more realistic aspects of a fight. Let's face it, down to back kick, sending you laterally flying forward with your leg while yelling, "Shake my fruitcake," might be fun, but it's just kind of ridiculous at the end of the day. I wanted a game that accounted for where you blocked, not necessarily just when. Character fatigue after an intense exchange of blows. A game that encourages you to be aware of your surroundings rather than just your opponent. If this isn't For Honor, then it's certainly a pioneer from which following titles will take inspiration. If you're planning on picking up this game, I want to hear from you. Which heroes are you excited to play? Who do you want to pledge your allegiance to? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this video and want to see me create more stuff like this, it would do worlds for me if you popped over to my Patreon and pledged your allegiance to me. If not, let me know why. Your opinion matters to me. Thanks for watching. Erik and I out.